Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. First, I want to say good afternoon to all Israeli and European participants, and good morning to the North American participants. I'm delighted to host this special JPPI webinar where we will be discussing the ongoing unrest in France. My name is Dov Maimon, Dr. Dov Maimon. I oversee the connection with European Jewish communities at the Jewish People Policy Institute. As you may have noticed from my accent, France holds a special place in my heart. I was born in Paris. Today's focus is centered around the ongoing unrest in France. I welcome Doron Almog. Thank you so much for being with us. So
thank you, Dov.
Yeah, so today's focus is centered around the ongoing unrest in France, but there is also unrest in Israel and unrest in America. So unrest, we speak of unrest in France, but don't feel too much stress, Yonathan and Simone. We believe that unrest is everywhere, as Simone told me earlier this morning. The solidarity of the Jewish people is our greatest strength. On the Jewish calendar today is the 17th of Tammuz, Tanit Yud Zayin B'Tammuz, a significant date reminding us of the importance of mutual support within our community. Past history has told us that we are all in the same boat. Kol Israel Arevim Ze Lazeh. We are united and stand together, knowing that fellow Jews will be there to support us whenever the need arises. When we are in rest somewhere, where other Jews maybe can help. So it's important that we discuss together, we have a conversation. In response to the global unrest, JPPI has taken the initiative to facilitate an ongoing conversation between diverse communities. Today's webinar is a part of our effort to foster exchanges and dialogue. Leaders and intellectuals from all corners of the world must come together to share their experience, offer support to one another. The Jewish people have no other choice but to be prepared for all possible scenarios. JPPI firmly believes in the value of policy planning and collective action. Therefore, we have invited two distinguished figures from European Jewry to share their personal perspective with us. They will shed light on the recent riots, the underlying social issues in France, and the potential implication for the Jewish community in the short and long term. But before we hear our prominent guests, it's important to acknowledge the presence of two influential Israeli decision makers. Both of them are not foreign to France. Both of them recently visited Paris. I think Doron and Ofir, we have been in Paris last week, I think, something like that, yeah? So what happened in France is not foreign to you. They have a deep connection with French Jewry. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Ofir Sofer, the Minister of Aliyah Integration, and Major General Doron Almog, Chairman of the Jewish Agency for Israel. Minister Sofer will address us in Hebrew, and I'll provide translation for non-Hebrew speaking participant. Ofir, הבמה שלך.
קודם כל, תודה רבה על הכינוס החשוב הזה, על היוזמה החשובה הזו, וזה בהמשך בהחלט בטח מתחבר גם, אנחנו עשינו דיון אתמול אצלנו במשרד, יחד עם הקהילות, גם בארץ וגם בחול, ואנחנו בהחלט עוקבים אחר ההתפתחויות, ומה המשמעותם של האירועים האלו, גם כלפי ביטחונה וחוזקה ומעמדה ומקומה, נקרא לזה, של הקהילה היהודית בצרפת, וגם בטח בתור שר העלייה והקליטה, בהקשר של ההשלכות בהתייחס לעלייה.
I will translate from not just a minute. Yes, so I welcome this meeting now, and I just want to say that it's a part of the ongoing process that we do. And yesterday we had a meeting at my office with leaders of French communities in Israel and French Jewry in France, and we discussed that what the implication, what the meaning regarding the security, regarding the status of Jewish communities in Europe and France, and as a Minister of Aliyah, and it's important for me also to regarding what does it mean regarding Aliyah. Please continue, yeah, Ofir.
Okay. ידוע מה שנקרא אני החלטתי למקד או לפקס את המאמצים שלי בהקשר של עלייה מן המערב, או לבנות ולפתח תשתיות עידוד עלייה בהקשר של המערב, מתוך תחושה שזו נקודה שאנחנו צריכים לחזק כאן בישראל ביחס לשנים עברו. ולכן בהקשר הזה, זה גם כיוון שאנחנו כבר בעבודה על העניין ובנייה של תוכניות, ותכף אני ארחיב טיפה, אז בהחלט נקרא לזה הסיטואציה, שעוד שנייה אני אוסיף עליה מילה, יכולה גם כן להתחבר ולהתממשק למציאות הנוכחית. אבל לפני כן, אולי הייתי צריך לפתוח בדברים האלו. אין ספק, זה גם עלה אתמול, ומי שמסתכל במבט פשוט, לא מדובר באירועים אנטישמיים. אבל כן מדובר במציאות מורכבת שבקלות יכולה להידרדר לסיטואציה אחרת, והיו גם כן אירועים אנטישמיים עם סימני אנטישמיות בתוך האירועים שחווינו בשבוע האחרון. אין ספק שזה גם מצביע על השינויים שעוברת מדינת צרפת, מבחינת שאנחנו כולם ערים לה, מבחינת המהגרים ומבחינת המספר המשמעותי שהם תופסים, ומה שחשה או חשים היהודים, או חשה הקהילה היהודית בצרפת בהקשר הזה. אנחנו ודאי היינו רוצים ומברכים והיינו רוצים שממשלת צרפת, כמו ממשלת ישראל, תצליח להתגבר. סתם, אני אומר, בסוף אנחנו לא רוצים לראות אירועים קשים אצלנו בישראל, ובטח לא רוצים לראות אירועים קשים בצרפת, בממדים הקשים והחמורים שהדברים הגיעו לשם. אמרתי, ברגע אחד זה יכול להגיע לאירועים אנטישמיים, ואנחנו וחובתי בהקשר הזה, זה להיות ערוך ומוכן, גם להשלכות בהקשר הזה של עלייה. אנחנו פיקה מתמקדים בעיקר כרגע בצעירים סטודנטים, אנחנו בונים תוכניות בהקשר הזה, אנחנו מתמקדים גם בעלייה קהילתית קבוצתית, וצריך לומר שבסוף התקציב הוא לא תמיד בעננים, הוא בדרך כלל גם מוגבל, יכול להיות שבהינתן שתהיה שעת חירום, אז יהיה אפשר לעשות דברים אחרים. כרגע התובנות שלנו זה שאנחנו צריכים לחזק את המאמצים שאותם התחלנו, בשביל לעודד עלייה ובשביל לאפשר עלייה, שזה נתונים שצריך לומר שאנחנו כן רואים ירידה בנתונים ובפתיחת התיקים, בלי קשר בשנתיים האחרונות, והמציאות הזו, ואולי יחד עם המאמצים שלנו, אני מקווה שיביאו לשינוי.
Thank you so much.
אני רק ברשותכם ככה, כיוון שאני ממש באמצע פגישה ויצאתי לטובת העניין הזה, אז נראה לי זאת אומרת, אלה הם עיקרי הדברים, ואני הייתי שמח לשמוע, אבל אחר כך, מה שנקרא, נשלים את מה שצריך. גם ישבנו אתמול לא מעט, אז אני סומך עליך גם כן, הרב מימון, שתתקצר את הדברים כמו שצריך, ותודה רבה. תודה רבה, דורון.
אופיר, תודה.
Yeah, so I just translate in few words what Ofir has said just now, but he said that he has decided when he joined the government to focus his effort regarding Aliyah, regarding the Western countries, and France is one of them. And and what he wants to say that today, for sure, as he has said yesterday very clearly by Yonathan and others, but it's not anti-Semitism what's happening now, it's the Republic what is targeted. But because we all know that it could happen, that something else could develop, and we have to be careful about it and be aware of that. He said that we have deep change in the France, and he showed us that he knows France very well regarding demographic shift and the place the migrants want to have in the place in the French society. And he hopes that the French government will overcome this kind of riots and he said we have to be ready. Today he has a plan. He's going to launch a plan regarding the students from France or other places who want to immigrate, who want to study in Israel especially, and also for families when we want to come with a kind of organized family group. And but he has limited budget, but he has to leave because he was between two meetings, but he joined us and he asked us to give him some feedback about what happened and what has been discussed here. So thank you so much. And now we'll welcome Doron Almog to the chairman of Jewish Agency. I don't need to translate you with my French accent.
Thank you, Dov. Just had been to France and Paris just a few days ago. Spoke with the New Olim, and the riots just started, not yet arrived into Paris, but on Saturday, last Saturday, they reached into Paris, and we saw looting, and we saw criminal activity, and also we felt fear, and people are scaring due to violence and activities of these people who are looting and breaking windows and behaving as criminals. In this situation, which you said is not directly came from anti-Semitism, but there is fear in the Jewish community. And I would like first to thank Professor Yedidia Stern for initiating this Zoom. It's very blessed. As you said, Dov, well, we are all responsible one for each other. Kol Israel arivim ze lazeh. And right now, in the wake of the circumstances, right now we are speaking. We are speaking, and I see Yonathan, the president, here with us, where we spoke when it all started. We spoke also. We met in the synagogue, but also we met later. We spoke later when the violence started or expanded into Paris. We are here, number one, to speak, to say to the Jewish community in Paris and in France, we, the state of Israel, the Jewish people who are living here in Israel, having love and sympathy to you. We have great concern on everything that's going on in France and Paris. And while being in Paris, I spoke also about the operation in Entebbe, which represents a commitment of the state of Israel for those who are taken hostage by terrorists. So when Jews in the world, in trouble, in misery, in suffer, in passion, we are here, the state of Israel, the Jewish agency is for you. Number one, to assist. Right now, we assist by our voice, we assist by showing empathy and declaring on our intention to be there, to be with you, on our love to you, on our heart with you. That is number one. Number two, I want to say to all of you that we're ready to stretch our hand and assist you. As we yesterday, Mark Wilf, the chairman of the Board of Governors of Jewish Agency, met few of the victims of terror in Tel Aviv in a hospital and brought them money, 4,000 shekel each one, from our special Victims of Terror Fund, the Jewish Agency having Victims of Terror Fund. So we assist people, and by giving them money, by being with them, by mitzvat bikur cholim, we are there, we are coming, we hug, and we are serious on our behavior. And in respect of the Jews in France, of course, I pray that the situation will come down. The situation will be much easier and peacefully for the Jews who are living in France and all over the world. But if there is deterioration, we'll be there with you. We have the Jewish Agency people on the ground. In Paris, we have Arya Bitbul, is head of the Jewish Agency in Europe, and he's there speaking the language. We have our emissaries, we have the Shinshinim, and our people on the ground, where we are there for Jewish education, for Jewish identity. We are there to assist. We are there to prepare those who want Aliyah. We are there to show them the way and the system on every single step, to be with them and assist them on the first steps, and later here in Israel in our absorption center and all over the absorption by teaching the language, the Hebrew, by speeding up a direct track for the business, for occupation, to finding a fast track to reach the occupation. If you are a doctor in Paris, we want you to be doctor in Israel, but the authority may not be giving you the opportunity because you are not authorized according to Israeli health ministry. So we are here to assist on every single step, from the beginning, from French, all over the way, and to absorption center and here in Israel. So bottom line, we are here as one people, united. Unfortunately, as we say in Pesach, many times every year, we say Bedamai Chai. So yes, when we face crisis and terror and looting, we are here. We stand with you, and we are ready to assist you. So this is my voice as the chairman of the Jewish Agency for Israel. These two words are very important. Jewish Agency for Israel. Israel is the center of the Jewish world, and everything is for Israel. So wishing you all the best. We love you, and we'll do our best to assist you, to empower your community there in France, and assist you on Aliyah and absorbing here in Israel. Thank you so much. Am Yisrael Chai V'Kayam.
Thank you very much, Doron, for your kind words. And we have to understand that Israel has the capacities to, on the world Jewish world, in the global Jewish world, Israel has the capacities to make big changes, big moves if it's required. But first, for sure, but what is dealing with the communities, we're dealing at the local level, and it's very important to listen to the voice, direct voice from the people who know, who can tell us what we see, because we have a bias from Israel. From Israel, the figures, the picture that we see look like the Intifada. So but it's mistaken. It's not Intifada. It looks like the same people, the same doing things, but it's not the same thing. And we have to understand the differences. We want to act accordingly and appropriately. So the French Jews are going to live in France for a long time. We don't see them living at the moment. As the Minister of Aliyah said, we don't see figures now of people registering for Aliyah. So it's important to have a strong community there, and we know the strong community that can also make strong Aliyah. So anyway, it's going together. I'm very pleased to let know the voice to the floor to Yonathan Arfi. Yonathan Arfi is first representative of French umbrella group of French Jewish communities, the CRIF, which is the political part of the Jewish community, and he also the vice president of the World Jewish Congress. So he has a double hat, double casquette, and so I'm pleased to have you. Please, Yonathan.
Thank you very much, Dov. I would like first thank the JPPI for this initiative. Thank General Doron Almog for his words. Thank, of course, the minister also for his words, and tell you all that we are very moved in France by the worry and the concern we feel in the diaspora and in Israel regarding the unrest in France. But I have to tell you the truth. 2023 is not the riots of 2014. If you remember well, we had in 2014, during the war between Israel and the Hamas, we had a lot of riots in France, which were anti-Semitic riots. Jews were targeted, synagogues were attacked, and the image were very violent, and it was very difficult for us. But this time, 2023, it's not the same story. The cities are the same, the images are the same, but the movie is totally different. And that's something which I wanted to make clear at the start of my speech, because we have to make no confusion between the situation now and the situation we had with anti-Semitic riots almost 10 years ago. This time, the whole French Republic is concerned by the riots, by the unrest. Jews are not directly targeted, but what is important to understand is that a lot of Jews live in France in very underprivileged areas. They live in the places where these riots took place. And that's something which made many frictions, many contacts, I would say, during the last 5 days, 6 days now, from the start of the riots. So you maybe heard about kosher stores which were attacked, about a Holocaust memorial which was depraved last week. We have no elements which enable us to say that they were directly targeted for being Jewish interests, but we are, of course, very, very careful about that. Our fear, to be honest, would be that in the next future, if this unrest continue, if things deteriorate, would be that the Jews be attacked for being perceived as very close to the public authorities, as being perceived as, I would say, a minority which betrayed the coalition of the minorities to side with the state. That's the way Jews are sometimes perceived by indigenous friends who have decolonial theories, post-colonial theories, and they usually see Jews as siding with the public authorities against the minorities, so against Arabs, against Black people. And if this kind of theories were reaching a large scale, it would be dangerous for us. But on this day, I have to say that the phenomenon we went through over the last week was not an anti-Semitic one directly targeting Jews, and that it may have an impact on Jews as any other French citizen. It may have an impact on the way Jews feel in the French society and in the way they consider their future in the French society, but it's not a Jewish issue, and that's something which is important to say. Regarding this ability to see our future in France, as you said, Dov, there will be Jews in France as long as France remain a prosperous and democratic country, and that's something we have to take into account. Of course, French Jews are very Zionist. We are very Zionist and very proud to be Zionist community. But at the end of the day, we are a very numerous community, and there will be a lot of Jews, of course, in France in the next years and decades, I hope, and even more. Nobody knows, and we have to take that into account. So our goal is to imagine the future of the French Jewry in its involvement in the French society and in continuing to develop its relationship with Israel. I think there is no Jewish community which can be compared to France in terms of relationship to Israel, due to its geographical proximity, due to the size of the French Jewry, to the strong Zionist, I would say, feeling among French Jews. And we have a key role to play, I think, in that dialogue between Israel and the diaspora. But what is important for everyone to understand is that France itself at large is now in the middle of a crisis, which is a real democratic crisis, because, as you know, we have populist voices in the political arena coming from both the extreme right and the extreme left. We have also violences coming from Islamist organizations, and all that puts French people, I would say, in a challenge position, and Jews have a role to play in that challenge, and we intend to do it with our own Jewish values, with our own Jewish history, our own Jewish vision, and of course, keeping in mind that we are attached to this link with Israel. So that's why I wanted to say in this discussion first.
Thank you, Yonathan. You want to add a few things about how do you see the future, what could happen, what regard the scenario that could happen, or you want to intervene later on about that?
The scenario on what could happen regarding the current riots or regarding the future of French Jewry?
You can choose whatever you want.
No, regarding the current riots, it's very difficult to say. It seems that the level of the violence lowers day after day over the last 3 days. So we can be little bit optimistic about seeing the end of this movement, but we have the national Bastille Day on 14th of July, and usually it's a day on which we have violence. So everything depends on how things will turn next week. But I'm reasonably optimistic about the fact that it will not last weeks, I would say, except if something dramatic happen.
And regarding the long term, because as we may understand, there could be a backlash of the far right, which could happen like we have seen already in Germany. And also maybe you can tell us more about what the motivation of all these people. They're a large group, they feel excluded, they feel marginalized, they feel they want to have a place in the French society. I think it's important that you tell all constituency to listen to the real voice of what's happening in France, because we have we look at that with the glasses of Israeli and American, and we don't really understand what is happening. What all these people make the riots?
You know, it's a mix of many reasons, and that's the current debate in France, to understand what has happened over the last week. For sure, there are some people who started the riots due to the issue between the police and young people in underprivileged areas, and they are of course focusing on the issue of racism in the French society and things like that, and discriminations. But when it started to be massive, it was not ideologically motivated. It was more motivated, I think, by the opportunity of looting, by the euphoria of groups going in city centers and looting shops, things like that. So people who were arrested were very young, sometimes age only 13, 14 years old. So it means that it's very worrying, because it means we have missed totally the education of these people in France. But what is interesting is to understand that it's not ideological, because when they are 13 or 14 years old, it's not ideology. It's not Islamist cells or something like that. It's social unrest, which benefit from the support from some groups, of course, Islamist movements, of course, the pro-Palestinian organizations also supported the riots and things like that. But it was massively non-ideological, I think. At the end of the day, France has still a problem in its relationship with its minorities. It has to work on it, for sure. But I think that the solution has to be a Republican one in French terms, not a multicultural one, because our DNA in France is Republican, and we would not be able to change the whole pattern of way of living in France. And regarding the future of French Jews, well, French Jews usually are perceived as the last Republicans in the French society. We are very attached to that model. Secularism, for instance, which is very criticized, I know, in the US or in Israel, because it seems to be an oppression of minorities. Religious minorities, is not perceived that way by French Jews. It has been perceived as a law of freedom and a law of protection by French Jews over the last century. So that's something which we would like to of course to defend, because we think it's necessary in the French model.
Thank you so much, Yonathan. We go fast directly to Simone. just tell us more. You are born in Germany. You told me this morning, so you are not fully French like Yonathan.
I am. Once you become French, you've always been French. It's like when you convert to Buddhism.
Yeah. So we'd like very much to hear how you see the things and what happened. And you remember when we talked this morning, you tell us about that the riots we had in 1955 and in 2005 was mainly in their own suburbs, and this time they come to the central city. So something happening there. But I give you the floor. Please tell us your perspective, and it will be very important for us.
With pleasure. So first of all, Dov, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
And maybe you just add, Simone, tell us what AJC for me is American company. It's an American organization. What do you do? AJC Europe, it just look like a bit strange. What is AJC Europe? What do you do in Europe?
Sure. So first of all, let me start out by thanking you, by thanking Professor Stern. It's a pleasure to be here. It's also particularly a pleasure to share the floor with my good friends Yonathan Arfi, who I usually don't agree with most people, but it so happens that I mostly actually 100% agree with what Yonathan just said. So I am the managing director of the American Jewish Committee in Europe. AJC is the first global Jewish advocacy organization in the world, despite its name. We have 8 offices and representations in Europe, and one of them is in Paris. It's where the European headquarters is and where I'm specifically based. Now, let me start out also by thanking you, because I think it's very important that an organization like JPPI actually demonstrates its interest for Europe and for European Jewry. For many years, for many decades, the conversation has always usually been about, and I know that's how we started out here, but it's usually been about, Aliyah. And I think it's a pity, because I think the European Jewish voice in particular has a lot to contribute, not only to contribute to, as Yonathan indicated, to the health of the society, because it's an indicator of the health of the society, of course, everywhere. But I think it's also very important in the way it can contribute in the conversation that is so needed at this particular point, about the future of liberal democracy and the future, frankly, of the Jewish people. So again, thank you very much. Now, about the situation itself, I agree with Yonathan. This is not 2014. This is also not 2005. It's not 2014 because Jews were not particularly specifically targeted. And it is not 2005, Dov, as you just indicated, because it wasn't just localized. This was not just in the banlieue. It was all over France. It was in Lyon. It was in Marseille. It was even to some extent in the center of Paris. And I think part of it has to do because it has to do with social media. And the fact that everything becomes very globalized and very national at a very quick and rapid pace. It's also not specifically Jewish, and I think it's very, very important to say it here because, I've seen Jewish media, I've seen the Israeli media, I've seen some politicians, including some very high-level politicians, to speak specifically about anti-Semitism, about what just happened now. And I think it's a mistake. I think it puts Jews at risk, and I think it gives the impression that we are entirely tone deaf. What is currently at stake is the future of the French Republic, and it concerns France as a whole. Now, about the situation itself, there is, of course, a reality. I mean, let's not forget where it all started, even if, nothing after what happened can be justified. But it is happening because a young man by the name of Nael, who was 17-year-old, was unjustifiably killed by a policeman. So there is a problem. There is a reality. There is a problem with the relationship between, and for decades really, for the relationship between, what we call the banlieue, the suburbs, and the police. There is a socioeconomic reality. There is a problem of discrimination. There is a problem of segregation of parallel society. And frankly, this has persisted for several decades. I'd say, as much as 40 years, really. There are a number of factors that contribute towards that. Ghettoization, the fact that French values and the French state have really had a very hard time penetrating into those areas where a large majority come from immigrant background, despite the fact that France has put a lot of money into the banlieue, but one can ask the question whether it was efficient and why not. It was not efficient. There has also been parallel cultures with drug dealing, with Islamism, with violence, but again, also with discrimination and lack of opportunities. It is very clear that today, if your name is Mohammed and you grew up in Clichy-sous-Bois, you without any doubt have less of a chance than, if your name is Jean-Claude and you grew up in Neuilly-sur-Seine. But it also become clear, and I think that's really quite significant, that what we have seen over the last week is that the language used and the activities by the different movements that aim to create basically a feeling of victimhood has worked pretty well. When you look at everything that has been said and done by those young people, and again, 1/3 of those who committed those riots were below the age of 18, some as young as 11 and 12 years old, has really been the work of the Muslim Brotherhood, of Islamist organization, of post-colonial and decolonial movements, and the far left, that basically has had the objective to create a sense of victimhood that can then be used and manipulated and exploited by those same organizations. And it's actually fascinating when you look at it, because when you see that today people like like Erdogan or someone like Marwan Mohammed, the chairman of the CCIF, the Collectif contre l'Islamophobie de France, which was actually dissolved a couple of years ago, speak exactly the same language like the decolonialist or post-colonialist movements that exist in France. There is state racism. The police is racist. You are all victims. The situation is terrible, and basically you are not responsible for anything. And the same goes for the politicians on the far left. When you look at the discourse of Jean-Luc Mélenchon and La France Insoumise, meaning the far left party, it's very, very clear that, these young people are not responsible for everything. The police is racist. Everything is horrible. It's the responsibility of President Macron. It's the responsibility of the racist police, and they are not responsible for anything. So the aim is really to radicalize those young people. And again, the same goes for the pro-Palestinian radical movements that we've seen for the past 2 decades that have played with that as well. The Palestinians are the underdog. The Palestinians are the victims. And so those young people, to a great extent, I think, sort of identify with that. And it's a very, very, I think, dangerous situation. And I think this is also why we have seen those young rioters today attack institutions, town halls, libraries, schools, basically everything that is sort of, represents somehow the institutions and the state. And so I think one of the reasons why this has taken over the past few days then has taken such proportion, again, compared to 2005, is because of social media. It has played a huge and a very important role. Because of the algorithms, because it radicalizes people, because of obviously, everything to do with post-truth and fake news. It creates a subculture that then can be basically diffused to a far higher degree. And also it creates this competition. Like when you look at social media, and I've spent quite a bit of time on TikTok and Snapchat, etc., you see that like there are these challenges that are being done by these young people between this neighborhood and this neighborhood, and look how crazy I am, and I can burn a car, and I can burn a library, and I can burn whatever, a police car. And so the role of social media, I think, has played a huge role. Now, on the other side, because as you said, Dov, there is a backlash. There is, of course, the far right, and which basically works hand in hand in reality with these radical groups. For the far right, what has happened over the past week looks like a campaign video. It's the far right wet dream. What has happened over the past days. It looks like a campaign video from Marine Le Pen, and I can assure you it will be used in the weeks and the months and the years to come for every far-right candidate that we will see and come and pop up in our environment. So, and people, I think, are more and more drawn towards this this far-right discourse because, you know, for years there has been a feeling of how we can call it cultural insecurity, and the fact that the moderate right and left have not been able to find appropriate answers to the problems that we have been facing for the past decades adds obviously another layer. Now, but going now back to the Jewish angle, again, I think the big problem is today that the Jews are sort of trapped between the extremes. You have on the one hand everything that I just described of the Islamists, of the banlieue, of the far left, of the decolonization movements, of the woke, of the whatever, and on the other hand, the far right who basically respond to that and work with that. And Jews, unfortunately, in this scenario are somehow trapped. There are some, and I don't think there are a majority, who believe that the ultimate enemy are the Islamists and the far left, who therefore are drawn towards the far right, and they forget that the far right actually not only feeds off and nurtures the other extreme, but that it's fundamentally not Jewish to begin to be on the far right. They also forget the fact that the Front National, or the Rassemblement National now, is still surrounded by radical anti-Semites. And they also forget that while the first target is sometimes Muslims and immigrants, there is no doubt about the fact that it ultimately does threaten a Jewish identity. And we have seen it, of course, in the last campaign when Zemmour and others basically said that the only way of being Jewish is to forget kosher food, to be entirely assimilated, and forget that you have another identity other than national.
Thank you, Simone. So, I will stop you now. I think no, it's absolutely okay. We want to leave time. I mean, we have a group of journalists on attendees that I maybe probably I want to ask you a question. I also would like to Yonathan also to tell us why it's not a good idea to think that far right could be a solution for the first Jews. But first, we have a respondent who is not aware. So it's among Professor Yedidia Stern is coming here, mostly listening to what you say. I will not say the first time, but it's not in depth as you are and I am in. So it's interesting to have just a French vision from Professor Stern. Maybe you tell us about what you think, please.
Thank you, Dov. Thank you, Yonathan. Thank you, Simone. Why would research institute will be involved in what's happening in Paris when it's not relevant to anti-Semitism, as you tell us, Yonathan and Simone? Well, you have to understand that Israelis, unfortunately, are totally locked into internal agenda, not only in the last half year, but for a long period of time. And we at JPPI feel that it should be changed. We deeply understand that we are one people, not only as a slogan, but as a responsibility. And Dov mentioned already Yud Zayin B'Tammuz, which is a day that is the beginning of 3 weeks of remembrance of what happened to us in the past and might happen chas v'chalila again. And the question is, what is our role as Israelis who are interested in the Jewish people as a global phenomenon? And when we heard about these riots, we didn't understand the situation. Obviously, you taught us, but we felt this is an occasion where we have to look into our neighbors, our partners, our brothers who are living with these riots on a daily basis. I feel that looking into the riots from the perspective of Aliyah is very narrow-minded. Obviously, I'm for Aliyah. We are part of the Sukhnut. We'd like Aliyah to happen. But this is not the agenda. And also looking on the situation from the perspective of anti-Semitism in the narrow sense of the word is also not understanding the situation. And I heard Simone and I agree. Our friends, our brothers, you are living in Europe. Europe is changing. You're living in France. France is operating on some kind of shifting sense of identity. And what's happening in the last few days is just one manifestation of many other things that happened already and chas v'chalila might happen in the future. And my agenda, our agenda at JPPI, is to make Israelis aware of the developing situation, not only in North America, which is obviously the center of our attention because of numbers, but also in Europe and in France. So we feel that when we talk, and whoever is here with us from JPPI knows it by heart, when we talk about cohesion between the Jewish people, not only the resilience of the Jewish people, but the cohesion between Jewish people, we feel deeply that Israel as a state is doing not enough to maintain what should be number one on our list towards the Jewish diaspora, creating cohesion between Jews worldwide. So what I want to tell you, my friends in Paris and elsewhere, look at us as your agent in Israel. Look at us as a bridge that may help you to voice your needs, your fears to the Israeli public. I can tell you that a year ago, JPPI appeared before the Israeli government talking about Jewish diaspora. And one of the ministers told us, for the last year, we never talked about Jews outside of Israel. And this is the problem. And this occasion, the riots are one opportunity for us to make this an issue here in Israel. I want to say that Israeli democracy 3 years ago decided to go through the real fight over the basic bill, Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. Many people do not like it. But part of it is exactly what we're talking about right now. Part of it is a promise of Israelis through basic law that we will act. The Hebrew verb is lif'ol, which is very dynamic. We will act to protect, to defend Jews around the globe if they are attacked because they are Jews. So I'm happy to hear that this is not the occasion last week, but it might be the occasion chas v'chalila next week. And we have to build the mechanism, the research, the interest, the emotions that will enable Israelis to fulfill their promise to themselves to defend Jews wherever they are. It's not just words. It needs to be part of a government planning, which will be taken seriously by us in cooperation with Jews outside of Israel. It's clear to me, and I think you should agree, that if bad times will come in France to Jews, the community itself will not be able to help the situation. I assume that the community will need outside help, and this will come from, hopefully, from us, from Israel. Let's start to build everything needed to be done to facilitate the bad case scenario, which will hopefully will never happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yedidia. I think you are very well. I invite people who want to ask questions to write them. I have just, we have less than about 9 minutes. Thank you very much, Yedidia, to be very short, to leave time for people who want to ask questions. So instead, as soon as I wait for other question, maybe I just ask you first, so why do you think it's not a good idea to have a far right? I know that, Yonathan, I know that a lot of French Jews have been very tempted there is a temptation to go on far right will protect them. What will happen in the scenario that the far right in 2027 will win at the presidency?
First of all, don't forget that we Jews have Jewish values. We have a Jewish history, and we will not accept to, I would say, to compromise on Jewish values. And the far right has still a political program which is based on the idea of exclusion. Second thing, if you look at what the far right wants, they want the ban on the kippah, for instance, in France. They want the ban of the shrita. They want, even sometime in some European far right, the ban of the circumcision, of the Brit Milah. Do you think we can consider a Jewish life in France with that conditions? That's not acceptable for us. And, you know, of course, they pretend to be defenders of Jews because they understand that the issue of the anti-Semitism coming from the Islamist movements is a topic of concern, of legitimate concern among French Jews. But at the end of the day, their vision is a very pure vision of the French identity, which has no real place for, I would say, the French Jewish dimension. And we are very, very, very careful about that. So we of course, we know what they want to attract Jewish voters, but we don't forget that it's just a strategy because they need a cautious stamp from our side in order to gain legitimacy in the French public arena.
Thank you, Yonathan. I think it's very clear. And Simone, I will ask you just a last question. You have listened to what Yedidia said. What do you think? What do you think? Do you understand? Do you think what we have something to do together? What we can maybe think together to share? Maybe I know that you're launching also a big service in Europe now, in France, and maybe we can also put some question of the JPPI. But how do you think that we? I mean, do you think it's important to have this connection? Do you think that we can be maybe a voice to you, to your needs of European Jews, because they are not heard by Israeli decision maker? We have opportunity. We have experience today how Israeli leading decision maker look at France as a reservoir for Aliyah, and it's okay. I mean, I absolutely pro Aliyah, but on the other side, people have their own choice. So, what you could say? We have 2, 3, 4 minutes now.
Listen, I think there is nothing more important than to have a global Jewish conversation, especially today. We have crises everywhere. You have a crisis in Israel. We have crisis in the United States. We have crisis in France. We have crisis across Europe. Every single one of those crises, the Jewish voice says something very particular about the state of the world and the state of the Jewish people. And I think it is more important than ever that we actually listen to each other. We have such a tendency to be self-absorbed about, you know, what's going on in our own country, in our own community, in our own, that we have a tendency not to listen to each other. And I think the only way we can be strong is when we actually start listening to the different voices, even the voices we disagree with. And, you know, Dov, I told you this earlier on. Back in 2014, Jeffrey Goldberg, the journalist from The Atlantic, came to France and came to Europe and did a huge piece on the future of European Jewry. And I helped him at the time set up all of the meetings across the across France, across Europe, etc. He did an amazing piece. But the end of the article, his conclusion was, European Jews don't have a future. It's over. And I said to him, maybe you're right. But, if anti-Semitism is a cancer that propagates, are you so certain that what we are currently experiencing will not one day come to the United States as well? And he laughed at me. Politely, but he laughed at me. And, fast forward, today we are in a situation that that of course it's different. It's not the same anti-Semitism in the United States. It's different, but we have a very, very serious problem in the United States. If you American Jews had listened to us French Jews back in 2014, I think we would have been better prepared. Because at the end of the day, what we are all experiencing are crises in different forms of our societies. And so, I take you up on your word. Let's work together and let's listen to each other in a very serious manner.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to stop now because we'll finish on time. And thank you very much. I mean, we agree that there is unrest everywhere, but there is a need for a global Jewish conversation. I take your word from Simone and from Yedidia. I believe that we have a lot. What I personally feel, that first, French Jews are a very vibrant community. We know that it's the world capital of Jewish gastronomy, 250 restaurants. It's a really vibrant community. We have every week we have new synagogues everywhere opening. So we have a lot to learn from French Jews, how they make it, and we can learn, as you have said, Simone, America is becoming Europe regarding anti-Semitism, and we have to be aware of what you say. And I think we have a lot of lessons. I hope that it's not finished. I will leave the two last 1 minute to Yedidia. Maybe we can continue this kind of serial of meeting with European Jewry and other things. What do you think, Yedidia?
Yeah, I think we may decide on a set agenda of issues. We don't have to wait for riots to do that. Set agenda, think about the main issues that we can talk about and help each other. Dov, you are an invaluable asset for this kind of discussion between the two groups, and we're all for it, and let's go for it. Just want to thank Dr. Shuki Friedman, who came up with this idea. So thank you, Shuki, very much, and the whole crew, whole staff in JPPI, as always, very efficient. Thank you very much, and thank you, Dov. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yonathan. Thank you, Simone. Thank you, all participants. We did not have time for questions, but next time we'll make it more time for questions and invite you to write questions so we can answer. Thank you to all. We just finished on time. Have a good afternoon, good morning, whatever, and Shabbat Shalom. Goodbye.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you very much.
Thank you.